Today is Monday, March 19th, 2007, and this is an interview for the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress. It is done under the auspices of the Voluntary Services of the VA Ann Arbor Medical Center. My name is Roland Shadig, and I have the honor today of interviewing Lawrence W. Hill at his home at 35 East All Saints Street in Frederick, Maryland. Larry was born June 30th, 1939 at San Bernardino, California, and served in the United States Naval Reserve from September 1964 to August 1968. Larry's wife Donna and my wife Barbara are sisters. Hence, this interview is taking place during a March visit in their home. Larry, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to record the story of your military service for the interest of future generations. And I would like to begin first by asking you about your father and your stepfather, who were both in World War II, and what kind of initiative that may have set up in you for yourself going into the service at a later date. If you could say a few things about that, what they told you about that, and memories that you harbored for all these years about that.
Okay, I was an only child, and my father, John William Hill, served as a CB, Construction Battalion, which is in the South Pacific during World War II. And I was born in 1939, and shortly after my birth, he literally, within a matter of a year, we were in the war, and he was on his way to the South Pacific. He served in the South Pacific building runways and airstrips on the South Pacific Islands that were used as attack points and attacking Japanese installations and fleet all over the South Pacific. And I can recall, among other things, when he returned, he had a pair of spurs made. He was a cowboy, been a rodeo cowboy as a youth growing up in Texas. He'd had a pair of spurs made for him out of aluminum from some crashed aircraft on one of these runways. And I still have those spurs, as a matter of fact. So there was a certain amount of romance of construction and South Pacific and the war and all. He literally left our life after the war, and within about 2 years of that, my mother met and married my stepfather, Dean Charles Henson. Dean had been an Army private, worked his way up to tech sergeant, and been in the infantry in the Army, and he'd served in the South Pacific also, basically in Burma, in the infantry, which meant that he had story after story of jungle fighting, of campaigns where very strange and unusual, but adventurous and scary things would happen in his life. The things that he came through, he was surprised he was still living, and other people had not. And one situation where I was enthralled, and I couldn't hear it enough times, where he talked about being in a foxhole with 2 or 3 other men, and nearby foxhole, one of the soldiers was smoking. And the sergeant came along and told him to put it out, keep quiet. And the next morning, that foxhole literally had been decimated. The Japanese had snuck into it. They'd followed the smell of the smoke, snuck into it, and apparently had killed all those, whereas he had known better and didn't do it. So you hear stories like that, and you think, well, this is what you do as a youth. And he was very proud of that, very, very proud of his service the rest of his life. And as a result of that, he also became a private pilot. And through the GI Bill, he got me interested in flying. And later on, I soloed a small plane.
Oh.
Same way, same thing. So picked up those things.
When you were in high school, then perhaps also in college, were you thinking already of perhaps going into the military?
Yeah.
This would have been the late 50s? Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, while I was still in high school, a friend and I went to a Marine recruiter and tried to sign up I came back home to told my mother and my dad about it, and she said, no, we won't sign the papers for you. You're not going in the Marine Corps, at least not until you're old enough to decide for yourself. So that was the first step.
Yeah. So you graduated from high school, then you went off to college. Where was that you...
Well, I started college at a community college studying architecture. And I'd been drawn to paramilitary type activities from my earliest youth. I was active in the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, been an Eagle Scout and Explorer Scout. And I ended up with a certain amount of interest in all the camping, all the outdoor activities like that. So it became a natural to be interested in the military. And to know that about this time there was a lot of press, a lot of information being given to President Kennedy was sending advisors to Southeast Asia. And I thought I might be interested in that type of thing, but my mother said, no, you've got to go to college before you do anything. You'll be the first one to go to college, you got to go to college. So respect her wishes. I went to college, finished the 2 years of associate's degree, thinking I'd transfer into college, into a 4-year school. But turned out they wouldn't accept the credits, so I literally had 4 years additional to go for a bachelor's degree. 2 years into that 4 years, I decided I was going to serve when I came out, so I enlisted in the Navy and became what we call a weekend warrior. One Christmas, I went to, matter of fact, that Christmas of my sophomore year, I went to Navy boot camp in Long Beach, California, and was enlisted as a seaman, became an able seaman, and then returned to college and continued going to 1 weekend a month. I went to Navy training as an enlisted man. When I graduated, I qualified to attend OCS, and that was the program that I'd signed and enlisted under. As long as I graduated, I could enroll in an officer candidate school.
Why did you want to go to OCS?
Well, my dad had been in the Army, and he said, whatever you do, go in the Navy.
Okay.
He's going in the Air Force and the Navy. He said, don't get stuck in the foxhole.
But for officer candidate school,
right.
why that? Why that route?
Why officer candidate school? Challenge. Yeah, just a challenge. Could I do it? And so I enlisted, signed up for that. And I had a friend in college who, actually 2 friends who joined me at the same time. One of whom made it to officer candidate school and the other one didn't. The one that did go with me, Jerry Horton, he and I took the train east from California. I still remember my mother up in the Palmdale at the train station hugging me and waving goodbye. And took the train to the east of Chicago and then into Washington, D.C. Came out at Union Station on a beautiful summer day and walked out of the front of the station, looked up, saw the Capitol. Always wanted to come to the east. And outstanding at the Capitol, just in front of it, there's a big pond, and there stood a young naval officer in pure whites, and he was holding a little sailboat regatta for a group of children. I said, boy, this is the right decision.
Yeah, yeah.
I can picture myself doing that.
Yeah. Now this is after OCS.
No, that was on my way to OCS. In other words, I'm still in the Navy.
Yes.
I'm in the Navy, but from Washington, D.C., I take the train to Providence, Rhode Island. There the Navy picks me up and bus and take to YMCA in downtown, what is the name of it? From Providence. Newport.
Newport.
Little sleepy Newport. And Newport, the next morning, I reported with a whole group of other people outside the YMCA, got a Navy bus. They took us to the base. They gave us shots, took the hair off, and gave us clothes, and pointed the barracks we were going to be in. And from that day on, I was Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was in, no question about it. Mm-hmm. Then the question was, could you survive the training? And the training was technical because there were aspects of it that were the navigation. The folks that have law degrees hated navigation. They couldn't stand the detail work. And many of them some of them would literally throw up their hands and say, no, I want to be a lawyer. I'm not interested in technical type things. But I'd had enough technical through the landscape architecture degree and the architecture degree that it wasn't that difficult. And even though I remember at 10 o'clock at night, the lights are out, and I'd have my flashlight on under my blanket, and I'd try to be memorizing things for the next day's exam. And with a little bit of surprise, because there were times I didn't think I'd make it.
Yeah.
I graduated and I took the oath of office.
What were some of the main traditional topics besides navigation? Was there gunnery? Did you have to learn that? Did you have to learn the mechanics of ship propulsion and all that?
Yep, basic engineering, maneuvering, formations that ships take for defensive actions, the formations they take for offensive actions, how they support each other, the hierarchy, the aircraft carrier being the queen bee, the frigates and the missile cruisers. In the old days of battleships, there was secondary and third, and then ultimately beyond the frigates, the destroyers, the small little tin cans that scattered. And I knew right then, I knew up front I didn't want to be on a tin can. And yet many of my shipmates thought they wanted to be an officer on a destroyer because there were only maybe very few officers on a destroyer, so you get to do everything. You get qualified underway. But I also knew I wanted to wear a star. And a naval officer with a star on his sleeve means he's a line officer, as opposed to supply, law officer, legal officer, any one of these other staff activities. And the reason that was important to me was that that meant that I was well-rounded, and I had the ability and could be called upon to actually command a ship. If the captain, right on down the line, one after another, and there's a very extreme and precise pecking order. If each one of those dies in succession, ultimately the line officer, who might be an ensign, controls the ship over a lawyer on board who might be a full captain. The line officer is the man that knows how to run the ship.
Okay. So you have graduated, you've taken the oath of office, you're an ensign in the Naval Reserve.
Were my folks proud.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You said you had a leave, that you went back home then and your stepdad took you to the
He
VFW?
took me to the local VFW. Oh, and he said, you got to be sure and wear your uniform.
Yeah.
And so we went to a dinner on a Saturday night, and he introduced me to everybody. I think if he didn't have ears, his smile would have connected in the back.
Yeah.
He was so pleased.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to take the camera over to your plaque there. That's a couple ranks higher than when you started your naval career. You are their Lieutenant Lawrence W. Hill. That was your discharge rank, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Those are called railroad tracks.
Yes. Okay. All right. And what's the next step? Do you have a decision to make after you've come out of OCS as to where you're going to go for further training or such things? What happens now?
When you're commissioned, you've got a couple options. And all during the second half of the training at Officer Candidate School, you have volunteer teams that are coming in, trying to find those that have a pre-inclination or are in some way interested in going in a certain area. They might become interested in being a pilot. And I wasn't interested in flying as much as I was not being on a ship and sitting out in the middle of the ocean up and down bobbing. I wanted to travel. That was the whole idea of the Navy. So along came a training. Part of our experience was that every man that goes in the Navy has to be able to swim. And they make sure you swim. You don't come out of Officer Candidate School and just swim. One of the ways that they make you do that is that they take you to the swimming pool and they put you up on a tower. They put a life vest on you, and they say you're to jump. And if your fear of the water is so great, even with a life vest on you, they know that there's no chance they're going to teach you to swim. And many a fellow, literally, and one of the fellows, a good friend, I bet for 3 weeks, one or two of us from our section, our company, would go with him to the pool after hours and try to talk to him and try to talk him through it. He'd go to the top, he'd come down. Ultimately, he finally jumped. He was as proud of himself as we were. But when you go into the water, then you realize, this is really what it's all about. That's what the Navy is. So when they sent a small team, a young Lieutenant J.G. from the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Program, and a seaman with him, and they said, anyone interested in diving, Navy diving, report to the pool after hours, and we'll interview you. And they did. They interviewed very briefly. Basically, you reported with your swimsuit on. They said in the water. We all jumped in the water. They put a diving mask on us with that had electrician's tape on it, so it's pitch black. And they gave you a tool kit, wrenches, not wrenches, but a series of simple pipes, elbow pipes. And they said, okay, you're to go over there in 5 foot of water and strap this weight around your chest, take a deep breath, go down the bottom, take the pipe out of the bag and assemble it just by feel. They wanted to see if you're comfortable enough to stay in the water. So I did that, came out of that. Those of us that stayed with that signed up for it, and then they had to do a background check, because if you went into the training, there are 2 phases. One was the diving, which means they'd take the expense of sending you for 2 months of diving training in Key West, Florida, which is no small investment by the Navy. And the second was that they would then send you on to the technical training for the bomb disposal. So once you had gone through the phase at the pool, and you're still expressed an interest, and a lot of people said, changed my mind, then they had you report the next day over to a small diver tender in the harbor. And there they strap this helmet on you. They put you in a deep sea diving suit, which was great. Man, talk about exciting. And put that helmet on you, and they walked you through it, told you what to expect, and that they were going to lower you off the edge of the boat, the ship rather, down into the water, down at the bottom. All you had to do is just take a deep breath, relax, and they were going to talk to you when you get down there. So they put you on a platform, walked over, stepped onto it, lowered me down into the water. It was dark. The water was pretty dark, pretty murky. And within a moment's time or two, I literally had water up all the way to my chin, because the suits are all old and very porous. And they leaked, and so you had water galore. And they told you in advance what you're going to do is you're going to control the flow of air into your suit.
You want to bring that up onto your lap, Larry?
Sure. Opening this valve.
That's heavy.
Yeah, I think it must be about 45 pounds. You had a couple of controls. You're inside this thing, and they're saying, are you ready to go down? You say, yep, ready to go down. Say, close this on you. They want to see if you have claustrophobia. Because they seal this down, you're bolted into it, and there's only one way you're going to breathe, and that's for the air that's inside, and that air is coming in from the back. So you've got a rope on it, you've got air being compressed into it. This controls the flow of the air, so you control your own supply of air, how much is coming into it. By opening this up, it literally, the pumps are pressing air into this. As you go underwater and the water comes up to your chin, you keep it out by opening this, and the pressure of the water pushes the pressure of the air pushes the water back down. When it starts getting foggy inside and you can't see, you open the spit cock. By flipping this up, you get a stream of salt water right in your face. You open your mouth, get a mouthful, spit in the inside, cleans this off inside, shut that. And then you control this when you start getting too much air in there, because it literally will inflate you like a balloon. It'll force all the water out of both your legs and also your arms, and then you become buoyant, and you can literally float to the top, and the suit will burst. That's hard hat diving.
Okay.
Now, this is a souvenir.
Yes. Let's look at your certificate that you got when you completed the diving portion of your training.
Okay.
It's right underneath your plaque there.
Yep. That was two months of as intense physical activity as I probably ever had in my life. Called the United States Naval Underwater Swimmer School, U.S. Naval Station, Key West, Florida. This certified that it's in L.W. Hill. USNR has, on this 5th day of March 1965, satisfactorily completed the prescribed course of instruction, employing self-contained and lightweight underwater breathing apparatus at this command, and is qualified U.S. Navy diver, EOD, scuba diver. And signed by Captain C.E. Plovnik. So
Okay.
that's the certificate.
All right. And where are you off to next?
Well, I was actually off to Miami to celebrate two months. And then after that, I was on my way assigned. I actually completed the training. I was given the week's leave, and I went back to California. Showed my my badges. I had earned the diver's badge. Showed that to my friends, and then I was headed for the next phase, which was the worst phase. And that is, the diving phase was bad in the sense that you were up at 4:30 so in the morning reporting in swim trunks, and you were running and running and running, and calisthenics and surf and all that type of thing. So it was all physical. As long as you could stay with it, you didn't give up, you're okay. But along the way, some would give up because either they didn't want to stay with the physical, or they knew what was coming, which was the technical part. And that's another 5 months. So the spiel was, during the heart of winter, we'll send you to Key West to be a diver. Then comes springtime, cherry blossoms time, cherry blossom festival time, we'll bring you up to Washington, D.C. And that's what happened. I came to Washington, D.C. for to enter the school at Indian Head, Maryland. As the naval base there was the naval propellant plant where they did exploration or studied explosives that went into torpedoes and various missiles. And part of that, there was a secured compound, barbed wire compound, that was the Explosive Ordnance Disposal School.
EOD.
EOD.
Okay.
Which is bomb disposal.
Yeah.
And at that time in 1965, this school was training all the Army, Navy, Marine Corps of this nation, and also we were training, we had students there from South Africa, from all over Asia, from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Russia, not Russia, I take it back. Time flies when you have fun.
Yeah.
Some of the Slavic countries, some of the European, German, Dutch. We had a lot of officers from a lot of different countries that were studying and going back. But many of them were also going to be serving in Vietnam, Southeast Asia. And that's where I thought I was going to be going. But in the course of going through the school, you're trained in every aspect of bomb disposal. They broke it down into things like drop munitions. Well, drop munition can be literally a hand grenade dropped out of an airplane to a nuclear weapon dropped in Hiroshima. So we studied all aspects of bombs, everything that could be dropped, even a missile. Sidewinder missile that could be fired from one aircraft at another aircraft could also drop and become a lethal weapon. I remember being astounded that at the end of one day of class where a friend of mine, Bill Jurikin, said, "Can you believe that we spent a day studying how to disarm a nuclear weapon?" And we thought, yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Was there any deeper emotion that came on you at that realization? Or was it sort of passing because you're young and...
Well, it's kind of scary. You thought they're trying to make you understand how quickly you can make a mistake. And the fact that you're working on a hand grenade that has already literally been released, and you're going to try to get to it before it goes off, if that's the case, all the way to a weapon, a bomb that might have fallen somewhere in Europe, and you're stationed in Iceland or you're stationed in England, and that bomb, someone's digging a foundation for a house, or they're in a farm field, and lo and behold, they hit something, and it turns out to have been a part of a rocket or something that came from World War II, and you've got to know what to do. You've got to know how to approach disarming that. Ideally, what you do is you blow it in place. You don't even mess with it. But many a time you don't have that option. So I learned to respect explosives. And at this time, I'd spent 2 years studying architecture, 4 years studying landscape architecture. Everything had been creative, been very, very aesthetic, you know, colors and shapes and forms, and 2 and 2 equals 4 plus. And now all of a sudden I had a chance to deal with detonator cord. And detonator cord looked like a piece of wiring from a lamp cord. But I learned how to wrap that around a tree and blow the tree in half. I could literally lift a tree right off the trunk, create a trunk. And occasionally we did things like that just for the fun of it. So it was just the opposite. All the time I spent studying, creating things, now I had a chance for 4 years to see what it was like to blow things up. And it was kind of fun. High adventure.
What's the next phase? You finished that EOD school.
Finished the EOD school, and we had a scare in there because at one point one of the piece of ordnance that was on display actually exploded. And it wasn't supposed to, but the grenade hadn't been safe, and it was World War II grenade. It had been in that school for probably 30 years. And it went off. So that kind of lets you know that, and that the Navy wasn't happy about that at all. There was a captain that was relieved because of that. We were then given assignments based on the needs of the Navy, and depending on your standing in the class, you got to choose. And I think out of 15, I think maybe I was maybe sixth, something like that, somewhere in the middle of it. The sharpest fella, I'm talking about the officers, because they were separated from the enlisted in the sense that each base would have an officer who led the diving team and the explosive ordnance disposal team, and then he had a group of 4 to 5 team members who were senior down to entry-level technicians that were enlisted. So let's see. The options I recall, I remember Wayne Turrell, who had a Porsche, and he was living fast and having fun, and I had a Chevy a Chevy Impala. Wayne was tops of our class, and he chose Vietnam. He had the top choice, and there were about 3 slots for Vietnam. And I thought, man, that would be good, because I knew what he was going to do. He'd be stationed to one of the aircraft carriers. And in an aircraft carrier, if you're an EOD officer, you and your team are at the base of the island, which means you've got your bomb disposal. If any ordnance hangs up when the plane lands, you run for it, and you disconnect it, you run it to the edge, and you drop it into the water.
Base of the island, meaning not an island in the ocean, and meaning part of the structure of
the main superstructure of the aircraft carrier.
Yes.
So there'd be a lot of activity. It's probably the riskiest place to be in the Navy, I think, is working on a flight, but most interesting. And one of my stepbrothers had served on an aircraft carrier, so I thought that'd be kind of cool too. But it wasn't open. By the time I got there, by the time I got my choices, I had the choice. The 2 best. These weren't the 2 best that were still out of the country, and I wanted to leave the country. Were the Aleutian Islands. We're somewhere off the edge of Alaska, I don't know where.
Yeah.
And the other was Newfoundland in the Maritimes, not far from Greenland.
Which isn't a whole lot better than Aleutians.
No, but at least I thought maybe I'll get a chance to at least go to Europe then.
Yeah.
So I chose Newfoundland, and it was a naval air station that had P-3 Orion bombers, patrol planes that were rigged for carrying weapons. We had a nuclear component on the base, which meant that we had weapons guarded 24/7, razor wire with Marines, and those nuclear weapons could be activated if necessary, loaded on the aircraft, and they could roll. They could strike anywhere, literally, in that half the world they wanted to. So we were responsible for that. Became my assignment. I was assistant weapons officer, which means that most of the day I spent serving under a lieutenant, and we had a division of about 20 men, and they basically we watched all the weaponry and on the base, and the base had a lot because we had a Marine detachment that protected all the boundary of the base, and with the constant training missions of all types, and they were firing. So we ran the rifle, the ranges, and all that type of thing. And then oversaw, when necessary, periodically we would step out, we'd go out and refresh our qualifications on disarming the nuclear weapons.
Did you have some very mundane responsibilities there?
Yeah.
What did it range from? The most mundane to the most ecstatic?
Most mundane. Morale officer for the division.
Yes.
Right? So I got our guys in the Iron Man trophy. Iron Man trophy meant that you tried to talk your enlisted men into joining you and competing against the rest of the base, the Marine Corps, any one of the other sections, in competing in every sport that they had. So we played basketball against the rest of it. Probably the worst scenario I had was we swam against. There was one swim meet in which, being a Navy diver, I was supposed to be the swimmer, at least within our group. And we ended up with a 50-yard butterfly race that came down to a Marine and me. And the only reason it was me was I couldn't talk anybody else in our division to get into the water and do a butterfly. I darn near died. I came in third, and there were only 2 of us in the race. But it was fun. But it boosted morale and kept the division going. We had a group of guys who really worked hard, so I'm proud of that. Plus, the captain said, well, if you've got a landscape architecture degree, I've got the admiral coming in the springtime, so I want you to spruce up the base. You'll be base beautification officer. And I thought about that, and I thought, this is a good opportunity to get back to the States. So I talked him into letting me have a bomber to fly to, I think we flew to Maine. And I ordered something like, I can't remember how many pallets. We filled that plane up with more than anything, it was daisies and about 5 different kinds of annuals. In the meantime, I talked the base supply officer into marshaling something like 50 or 60 guys, and they painted rocks white to create an outline around the officers' club, around the administrative, where the flagpole was. So we planted up the base, and the admiral came. He was happy. The captain was happy of the base, and he was. It turned out fun. Fun experience.
Yeah. Now, have you gotten a promotion in there by that time?
Well, by that time I was JG.
Junior grade.
Yeah, JG. And I'd gone on. I think I earned that on notified of that while I was on a training mission in Iceland. Of all things, in wintertime, they sent me to Iceland with my team. They were having problems with what now is declassified, but they had a listening device that ran from the NATO base that we ran in Iceland off the coast, and we had to find out what the break was, and it was an underwater job. So they sent a civilian who turned out to have been UDT or SEAL, and he and I and one of my team went into the surf, literally in the winter, and in Iceland, the water underneath is clear, but it's like the surface of the moon, that there's craters. It's all volcanic. So there's a little bit of sand here, a little there, but other than that, it's peaks and jagging, and it just drops off into nowhere. And off we went down into the dark. And within a few minutes' time, this fellow, this SEAL, ex-SEAL, is gone. I mean, he just literally swims off into the dark, and I'm swimming as hard as I can. And I finally came back up with my man. I said, "Do you see which way he went?" And I said, "No." He said, "But I think he's coming back." And sure enough, we looked out, and about 50 yards out, he popped up. He said, "Okay, I found it. We're good. We're through." So we swam back in and came back into the base. But that's cold water, because you're not far from the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
It takes your breath away when you get in.
So you're morale officer, base beautification officer.
Assistant weapons officer, EOD officer, diving officer. I led on one occasion, went to led our diving team out in an effort to search for a couple, a Navy sailor and his wife, who perished in a blizzard. We found their bodies underwater and recovered their bodies, and working with the local fishermen, and that was a sad situation. But you did what you needed to do, and you did it 24 hours a day, and that was probably the toughest thing about it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you always knew the phone was going to ring or could ring.
That was your responsibility as an officer for that 24-hour, round-the-clock responsibility.
Yeah.
And how long did that go on, that kind of long-term, round-the-clock responsibility?
Well, that's what you sign up for once you're commissioned. You sleep whenever they tell you to sleep, but when you become a specialist, then the needs are different. And the Navy's needs are paramount, obviously. So when you're a technician that has diving skills, and all of a sudden someone's lost in a lake, they say, go get the guys that dive and put them in the water and try to find them. If it's a piece of ordnance, they're having problems with a bomb hung up on a plane, or there's something unsafe about a piece of ordnance in a storage facility, who knows what it might be. might be chemicals leaking from a bomb, become unstable. Then they're looking for the folks that understand explosives and how to deal with explosives, and to tell them, the commanding officer, what he's supposed to do, how far he's supposed to have people away. Had opportunity in one case to blow a building up because the captain wanted an old building on the pier taken off. He wanted to, so pulled out the books on how to cut steel with explosives, and we created what's called a shape charge, which is a very popular way of directing the forces of explosion into a pinpoint accuracy, and strap those onto this thing, onto these steel piers, actually 4 supports this old building, and set it off, and just about rattled every glass. Every officer's wife was calling the captain saying, "What happened?" Thinking, it's something blown up with some part of the, and we literally broke glass all over, broke dishes. It didn't even touch that steel.
Really?
I told the captain, I said, "Sir," I said, "that's the best I can do." He said, "Well, I don't want you to try any harder than that."
There were dependents on that base then too?
Yeah, there were families, yeah, whole families. Matter of fact, there was a school there, elementary school, and there were civilian teachers.
How many personnel actually at that base?
I'd guess maybe 1,200 all
Okay.
told. And it was in a small little outstretched portion of Newfoundland, surrounded by a few fishing villages.
Yeah. And you had responsibility for how many men yourself?
Well, I was assistant. I was
Okay.
responsible to one man, then he was responsible for about 25.
I see.
And I had about 20 in that division, plus I had my own diving team, which is
Okay.
4-man, 5-man, depending on.
And you said, and I saw in some of your notes, that this was a difficult responsibility, that around the clock, never knew when you could sleep, plus you had to monitor so many different issues of logging this and that, and getting supplies for beautification and all kinds of stuff. And that
You're multitasking, there's no question about it. Sometimes a year, spring, whatnot, then you end up with something extra like the beautification, but that's a relatively short period of time. The biggest challenge is that even when you're away from the base, it's on your mind 24/7. And the closest city was about 2 hours away. I bought a little Volkswagen. I traveled those Saturday morning. I'd usually go up there, and I'd rented a room up there, and then I'd come back Sunday night, hoping it wasn't going to be snowing. So that was it. So I got to know the Canadian people, the Newfoundlanders, the salt of the earth. Basically settled by the Irish. They fish those outer banks, and how they stand that kind of weather and that kind of work for that many generations, I'll never know.
Yeah. So you had contact not only with civilians, but non-U.S. people, Canadians. It was just...
often I'd stay at the Canadian Army Officers Club, Bachelor Officers Quarter, while I was in town. So I got to know many of the Canadian officers, and a fair amount of the civilians. Matter of fact, the civilians are pretty busy and pretty active part of the workforce around a military establishment abroad.
Yeah.
So.
Were you in touch with any of your buddies that you were in training with who were deployed elsewhere, like over in the Far East, Vietnam? Any contact with them?
3 of them I was. Well, I take it back. There were 3 of us kept in touch. Remained friends until the end of my service. But none of them made it career, because explosive ordnance disposal, you're a line officer, but a line officer's quest, if he's going to become career, is to be qualified underway, which means you serve 2 years, at least 2 years on a ship, a Navy ship of the line, which means you've learned the engineering, you learned the armament and the weaponry, and you've learned navigation, you've learned all those estimates, and then you're also able to actually steer the ship, take it in and out of port, carry all those rules. I decided I wasn't going to be career the minute I went through the volunteer. If I'd gone aviation, I could have remained career. I could have been a brown shoe sailor, which is naval aviation. That way that would have worked, but not bomb disposal, not technician. The only way I could have done then, and I thought about that, would literally with that kind of background, was to leave that and go into the SEALs, go for UDT and SEALs. And SEAL team training in that time, I was getting reports from Southeast Asia, Vietnam especially, the people I knew that were operating in the Mekong Delta. And they said a lot of it was, so much of it was insertion, swimming in at night. And you literally, you can lay in a pool of water for 5-6 hours waiting for somebody to come along that you want to nab, and then you grab them and try to take off with them. And so that wasn't, that was really more a macho, more of a warrior type thing that I was interested in. I had too interested in blowing things up.
And you were proud to be a naval officer?
Oh, proud, yeah.
Say something more about that. Okay, yeah. But 4 years was enough for you?
Yeah, that was enough.
Yeah.
That was enough. I proved myself I could do it.
Yeah.
You know, I found that I put myself in situations where I wasn't sure that I could take the next step, but I found that I wouldn't quit. That I'd talk myself into staying with it, and that builds confidence like nothing else.
Yeah.
And there are many a youth that I wish put themselves through whatever means in a situation where they have to decide, am I going to stay here and keep doing this? And if you do, you feel so good about yourself, and you feel such a camaraderie with others that do the same thing. I stopped at a supermarket today to get something, and I walked up to two troopers that were standing at an ATM, and I just shook their hands, said, "Appreciate your service." And needless to say, they turn to me and see someone that's senior, and they say, "Thank you, sir." But I will usually return and say the same thing. Yes, I say, "Thank you, sir."
Yeah. You told a story yesterday about one of your colleagues who made it almost to finishing a particular training program, and then...
Feel bad about that guy. Feel bad for him even now. Sharp guy. I mean, the guy had a degree in fine arts, and that's what he wanted to be. He'd gone into the Navy to be a naval officer, become a naval officer. He decided to, for some reason, maybe like me, he wanted to try something less creative and a little more risky, and so he'd gone into EOD. He'd gone through the diving training, but he only got as far as the physical stuff was getting to him. In the morning, as the sun comes up, you're doing jumping jacks in the surf to build probably more than anything, just to make sure you'll do it. If they say do it, and you do it. And after one situation, we had dinner one night, and the night before that, we'd gone on a diving operation at night. Literally, we were dropped off at sea in a small boat, only a couple hundred yards off the beach. But they put lights on a truck on the beach, and he was a swim buddy, and which means we were connected by a cord. We went to the bottom, and moonlight was coming down through the ocean. That's beautiful, just gorgeous. And I've got a compass on my wrist, and I'm trained to follow that compass on a certain heading, and if I come up near that truck, then we've succeeded that exercise. And he's swimming along, watching on either side and above us, just see if there aren't any fish or any problems that the surface people miss. And as we're swimming along, all of a sudden I feel this jerk. And at first I thought it was jerk. There's a small flashlight that's bobbing on a cork on the surface, so they wouldn't know where all the dive teams are. They can follow them. But it wasn't the boat trying to call us in. 3 jerks meant there's an emergency. You need to get out of the water quick. Shark, some kind of something worrisome. And he looked at me. I felt this jerk looked at me, and he pointed up, and we saw 2 other fellas on the same event swimming like crazy in the opposite direction. Matter of fact, their shadow went over us, and I thought it scared the heck out of me. I thought it was a fish. And he looked at me, and I looked at my compass, and I said, "I think it's this way." So we kept swimming, and we came up, not too far, but we passed the event, and other people were coming up to the surf. And meantime, we looked, and that light was still going out to sea. That team didn't pass that event. Not like that. They finally had to run him down and tell him you're going the wrong way. Well, anyway, that next night we had dinner together, and we're talking about it, and he says, you know, I don't like doing this. He said, I just don't like doing it. And I said, what do you think about doing it? He says, I'm thinking about ringing the bell, getting out. I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I just become a line officer. I'll go on board ship. He said, can't be too bad. I'll serve 4 years, and I'm out. And I got to thinking about it. I thought, you know, this is not the thing you talk someone into. So I attempted to talk him out of it, thinking that if I was really persuasive, he'd really test himself, and he'd say, no, wait a minute. You know, sometimes reverse psychology. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first times I tried that, and I thought, if it's ever going to work, this is where it works. Mm-hmm. So I said to him, you know, I said, this is probably a good idea, because what we're going to is next phase, the technical phase, you may not really like. If you don't like this, you're not going to like that. Put them together. And he said, yeah, I pretty much made my mind. I said, okay, how can I help you? He said, well, just let me know how you do. And good luck. Mm-hmm. And we parted company the next day. He left the base. He rang the bell and he left. And I thought to myself, if I were him, I would not be able to sleep as well. It's one thing if you try it and you don't make it. They say, no, you came up short. And I've done that in my life. But it's another thing when you say, you know, I thought this was a good idea, but I'm not going to take it to that part. I'm not going to take it that far. I'm going to short it. And so he left it, and I always felt bad for him. And I'll bet you money if I talked to him today over a glass of wine, he'd say, yeah, if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And I knew all my life I'd made the right decision. Yeah. You know, I could have quit at any time, but the time to quit was after you'd done it.
And it's obvious that left you with a very good feeling about sticking it out.
Yeah.
Sticking out a lot of things in your life.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You know, quitters never win and winners never quit. Yeah. That's really the bottom line.
We have about 12 minutes left. Somewhere along the line, you met a lovely woman.
I did.
And that led to the altar in the Naval Academy chapel.
Not quite the Naval Academy, but in
Close
our mind,
by?
even better than that. Yeah.
Okay.
Bowling Air Force Base Chapel.
Which Air Force Base?
Bowling Air Force Base, which has the Marine detachment on it that serves the President. Marine Corps Helicopter 1 is...
I see. I guess I misunderstood that event. But tell us how you met her, active duty naval officer, and show us a picture or two that we have.
After the active duty, I returned back to the school, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal School, where I became a section head and dropped munitions. So my responsibility then was to train people, officers and enlisted, on how to handle that type of ordnance. And during that time, I was living in Washington, D.C. In the process of doing so, I was living in a place called Capitol Park. Really nice place, a lot of sharp young professionals. Had a party with a group of friends, opened it up, and there's this beautiful young lady by the name of Donna Hayworth who showed up. I was smitten. And I talked her out of going to Germany, where she thought she was going to go she was probably going to go, you know, meet the dreams of this fella that had hopes of capturing her. But we started dating, and we married at the chapel. Air Force Colonel married us. And we got a picture of, as we were leaving the chapel, the tradition is that you leave under an arch of swords. And those are some of my military buddies, all of whom are officers. The tall fellow on the lower right-hand side is Bob Foley, who later became a Major General. And also he had two distinctions. One is he, in Vietnam, as a platoon leader, he won the Medal of Honor. But the second was the more dangerous, and that is, tradition has it that his position as a commander of the guard swats a bride on the rump as she walks past with a blade. He survived both of those.
Okay, let's get the other picture
Okay.
there of
Yeah,
the.
this is at the altar. Beautiful lady, huh?
Yes.
As they say, I married above myself.
Uh-huh. Beautiful lady, a bride, and a handsome Navy lieutenant.
Happy
Yes.
ever after.
Yes. Any other, in 10 minutes, comments, remembrances about your naval officer career that come back to you at this point? That
I had an opportunity while I was down at the naval, at the EOD business and EOD school, to return to on a recruiting trip to the same base, the Officer Candidate School. And in effect, 3 years after it had happened to me, I ended up in that same pool, evaluating young officer candidates to see if I thought that they were going to be able to cut the mustard. And basically, I did the same thing that they had done for me: put them in the water, say how comfortable they were, and that was a real pleasure. That's where the student becomes the teacher.
Yeah.
And it also helps you measure how far you've come, both as a leader, which is very important, and also as a judge of people.
Mm-hmm.
Those that you think you'd like to serve with, because you have to make a recommendation,
Mm-hmm.
and those that you get instinctively think, no, this person is all for themselves, and I don't think I can trust them. I certainly couldn't trust them with my men, so I wouldn't want them to lead
Yeah.
anybody that I trained.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was fun. That was great fun.
Yeah.
So from the thrilling opportunity of getting off that train in Newport, Rhode Island on a fall day, actually getting off the bus in Newport, and the first leave weekend, the leaves were falling in Newport. Saturday afternoon, the kids were going to a high school game, and it was old England, New England. Here I am, a kid from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I'm in training to become a naval officer, and I'm in the heart of the Navy's really origins. I came a long way just in that step.
Yeah.
And later on to come back as a coach, so to speak, and a recruiter. It was fun.
Yeah.
Great ride.
Yeah.
Recommend it to any and all.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think it should be required to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of public commitment to somebody else other than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you maintained any contact with veterans organizations after you got out of the Naval Reserve, VFW, American Legion, any of those organizations, or any contact with the Navy itself as a civilian that you've kept up with?
Not other than the Navy Memorial. Contributed some money towards the building of the Navy Memorial.
Oh.
And were logged on as members of the Navy Log, which is a record of anyone that's ever served.
Yes.
Either on the Navy, or I also entered my father as a CB
Mm-hmm.
in the Navy Log. And it's something that I really should do. I have once or twice written correspondence to men that are serving, encouraging them through some of the programs that are available
Yeah.
for folks that are abroad now.
So as you approach retirement, that may be something that you will consider then.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
I'd like to also encourage youth to consider service
Mm-hmm.
in whatever fashion. I'm particularly proud of the Navy, particularly. I mean, to the core. To me, a great fall day is sitting in the stands watching Navy play at the Navy Marine Corps Stadium. And I've only done that a few times. But that was one of the first dates that I took my wife to. And it was great fun. And the irony is, I don't think she probably remembers this, but I happened to introduce her to a previous girlfriend whose father was a Navy commander. The
Yeah.
good old days.
So most of your civilian life then after the Navy was devoted to landscape architecture and parks and planning commission.
Yep.
And yeah.
Planting those trees and
Yeah.
laying out those park facilities.
Yeah.
A lot of activity, a lot of recreation. Ball fields, golf courses, swimming, hockey, literally polo field.
Mm-hmm.
Every aspect of leisure and recreation planning. Donna supported me afterwards, so I came out, we went to Penn State for a master's degree in planning for recreation facilities, and that was a great experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, Larry, any final concluding words that you would like to say? Tell us about your military service or your civilian life thus far, just to cap this off.
no, I feel I've reached the halfway point. I've got the best half is ahead.
Okay.
I'm an anchor cranker through and through, always will be. And the more I know about the military, the more I respect those that served and especially gave up their lives for the country. Because I don't think we'd have what we have today if there weren't people that were totally selfless, unselfish, who've given up not only their lives, but the opportunity to have children. And, you know, what greater gift can a person give to another than to try to protect them? And that's what they've done for us, so I have the highest regard and respect for them. And beyond that, there's only one other thing that can be said beside the toast, which is to the winds that blow, the ships that go, and to the girls that love the sailors. That's one of our better toasts. And the only final thing I can think to say that will ring true throughout the ages is, go Navy, beat Army.
Larry, on behalf of the Veterans History Project, thank you very much for letting us into your home, for sharing your story, and for your service to our country. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure and my honor.
Very good.